I didn't understand what humiliation felt like until my English teacher opened my diary, cleared her throat, and started reading my secrets out loud like they were Shakespeare. It happened in second period on a Wednesday, the kind of day that should be forgettable. But I remember the smell of dry erase markers, the hum of the projector, and the exact laugh from the back of the room when she hit the line where I'd written, "I think my heart is broken and I don't know why." This is the story of how my teacher, an adult I trusted, turned my private words into a performance, and how I went from shaking in a plastic chair to standing up for myself in a way I never thought I could. If you've ever felt small because someone bigger decided your boundaries were optional, you're gonna understand every beat of this. I've always been a writer. Not a fancy publish a book writer, more like the type who scribbles on napkins and sticky notes in the margins of worksheets. If I don't write something down, it echoes in my head until I do. My diary was the only place the echoes went quiet. I grew up in a house where people loved me, but feelings were tidy. My dad's a paramedic, which means he talks in facts. Vitals, timelines, protocols. My mom teaches primary school, which means she thinks everything can be solved with a schedule and snack time. We don't do drama at home. We do. Use your words, then wash your hands. So my diary was where the messy parts went. The crushes, the worries, the fights that felt too small to call fights. The names I wrote when I couldn't say them out loud. At school, I was the reliable kid. Honor roll, hall pass monitor, the one teacher sit next to the new student. Because she'll help. I wasn't invisible, I had friends, and we laughed too loud at lunch, but I wasn't the girl people whispered about. I liked it that way. I could glide. Then there was Miss Hale. She taught English like it was church, lots of reverence, a little fear, and definitely a correct way to sit in your chair. She had silver hair in a perfect bob and glasses on a chain. Her favorite sentence was, "Let's raise the standard," which sounds inspiring until it's used like a ruler you keep getting smacked with. She loved the classics and tolerated everything else. She also loved teachable moments, which I now know is teacher speak for I have power and I'm going to use it in front of an audience. I actually liked her at first. She used to write comments on my essays, like, "Your imagery sings," and then circle 3 paragraphs and write, "but sing less." I thought she saw me. Maybe she did. Seeing isn't always kindness. There were 2 other important people that year. One was Noah, who wasn't my boyfriend but sort of felt like it in group chats after midnight. We flirted like it was a job we hadn't officially been hired for. He played basketball, had soft brown eyes, and said things like, "You're easy to talk to," which is teenage code for "I'm scared to say I like you." I wrote about him a lot. Every time he smiled, I wrote 3 paragraphs like I was getting paid per adjective. The other person was Ava, my best friend since year 7. We shared headphones, fries, and enemies. We knew each other's schedules better than we knew our own. We also had this unspoken competition over being the good kid. We both wanted gold stars without looking like we were trying. It's a delicate sport. That's the cast. Me, the diary girl. Miss Hale, the high priestess of English. Noah, the question mark with dimples. And Ava, my almost sister with a habit of looking away exactly when I needed her to look. The day before it happened, it rained so hard the gutters sounded like applause. I'd been up late the night before, writing in my diary because Noah had texted, "Asterisk, can we talk?" Asterisk, which is one of the worst sentences in any language. We'd been messing around with labels, not friends, more than friends. We don't need labels. And I'd written 2 pages about how much I hated pretending I didn't care. I wrote about the way my stomach dropped every time I saw him and how my chest felt tight when he laughed with other girls. I wrote the truth. I don't know if I love him, but I'm practicing. I put the diary in my backpack, tucked between my English folder and my lunch, because I wanted to write during study hall. That's all. I didn't plan on reading anything to anyone. It was supposed to live in the private ecosystem of my bag, the same place where gum wrappers and broken pens go to die. Second period, I slid into my usual seat by the window. The classroom smelled like damp hoodies. Miss Hale was already writing on the board. She said, "Today we learn how vulnerability functions in a narrative." I remember exactly, because the word vulnerability made my ribs feel like piano keys. She passed out a handout with examples of effective honesty. Little paragraphs from essays that made you feel like you were perched on the writer's shoulder inside their thoughts. I actually love that stuff. I started taking notes, specific scenes, sensory detail, stakes that matter. I was in my happy place. Then Miss Hale did that thing she does where she scans the room like a lighthouse looking for a ship to rescue a ram. Her eyes landed on my open backpack. I didn't think anything of it. I'm neat. My backpack looks like a brochure. She said, "We'll practice by hearing some real writing." Volunteers? Dead silence. It was early. We were damp. No one wanted to share. She smiled, a tight little smile. No volunteers? Then we'll do it this way. And she walked down the row, slow, measured. I thought she was going to pick someone at random and make them read their homework. Instead, she stopped at my desk, reached into my backpack without asking, and pulled out my diary. I said, "That's mine." Too slow, like my mouth forgot how to run. She said, "I know," and flipped it open. "Don't," I said. "Please." The please came out like a squeak, weak and polite, like I was asking for a different sauce at a restaurant. She looked at me over her glasses. "This is an instructional environment," she said. "We're exploring voice. You, of all people, will appreciate this. I still hear you, of all people, like a curse." She started reading, not a random, safe paragraph, not a page from year 8 about how I hate PE. She read the fresh part, the Noah part, the part where I'd written his name and the word love in the same sentence. She read my metaphor about a chest full of bees. She read the line about how sometimes I didn't recognize myself in the mirror when I tried to be cool. People gasped. Someone snorted. Someone said, "Dang, I went cold." Cold like the moment before a car crash when sound stops. I raised my hand because my brain is a rule follower even under attack. "You can't," I said. "Please stop, that's private." She didn't stop. She said, "Notice the cadence." And she kept reading. Notice how she moves from concrete detail. She shook the diary like a book you're selling on QVC, to abstract feeling. Laughter bubbled in the back, the kind that's shame wearing a mask. Ava sat frozen 2 rows over, mouth in a straight line. She didn't look at me. Noah wasn't in my class, thank God, but the boys on the basketball team were. One of them, who thinks sarcasm's a personality, said, "Yo, Queen Bee," and the room broke into little ugly giggles. Something inside me moved from freezing to burning. The thing about humiliation is it can either melt you into a puddle or harden you into a statue. I felt both in the same second. I stood up. My chair shrieked against the floor. "Give it back," I said. My voice sounded bigger than my body. Miss Hale said, "Sit down," like I was a toddler. She had no idea that the version of me who followed rules had already left the building. I walked to the front. My legs shook so hard I could feel my socks. I put my hand on the diary and said, "You don't have permission." She didn't release it. We both held on like it was a rope in a game we didn't agree to play. The class went quiet the way rooms go quiet when a dog growls. "Boundaries," I said, and I surprised myself. "You're teaching voice, not consent. That's my writing. It's not yours to use." My hands were shaking, but the sentence came out clean. She stared at me. Something in her eyes flickered, annoyance maybe, or embarrassment at being challenged. She let go. I hugged the diary to my chest like a shield and went back to my seat, and she said, "Brittle. We will discuss this after class." We did. But not in the way she expected. After class, Miss Hale asked me to stay. The room emptied in a rush of whispers. Ava lingered in the doorway, then left without making eye contact. The door clicked shut. Miss Hale perched on the edge of her desk, like a woman in a brochure for private schools, and said, "I understand your feelings were hurt, but you need to appreciate that writers use their lives. Your work is good." I thought it would help the class. "Help the class? What?" I asked. "Learn where the line is when you cross it?" She huffed. "You are being dramatic." "I'm being clear," I said. "You read my private writing without permission. You reached into my bag. That's not a lesson. That's a violation." She waved a hand, dismissing the word like a fly. "Let's not use loaded language." I said, "It's loaded because you loaded it." I felt something calm settle over me. I think it was anger deciding to stand instead of pace. She tried a different tactic. "If you're embarrassed about the content, this boy, remember that good art requires risk." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't have space left to cry. "You didn't take a risk," I said. "I did. Alone. In private. In a notebook you took." Her face tightened. "If you make a fuss, you will look childish." "And I am a child," I said. "You are the adult." Silence. We looked at each other through the kind of air that crackles before lightning. "Please apologize," I said finally, "and confirm you won't read anyone's private writing again." She didn't apologize. She said, "If you cannot handle critique, perhaps you're not ready for advanced English." And there it was. The threat. The suggestion that if I wanted the path I was on honors, university applications, essays with A's, I needed to swallow this and smile. I said okay and left. Not because it was okay, because I had just decided to change the venue of the conversation. I went straight to the counselor's office. I told Mrs. Park everything. The backpack, the reading, the words, the laughter. I showed her the diary, what page had been open, how fresh the ink looked. My hand shook so hard she slid a box of tissues across the desk just so I had something to hold. She didn't say much, just took notes and made that serious, slow nod adults make when they're moving from comfort to action. She called my mom. Then she called the vice principal, Mr. Davies, who has a kind face that makes you want to tell him what's wrong. They listened. They didn't ask me to consider the teacher's perspective, which I was braced for. They asked me what I needed next. No one ever asked that. I said, for it to not happen again, for her to say sorry, and for the boys to stop calling me Queen Bee. Mr. Davies said we can do something about 2 of those today. They scheduled a meeting with Miss Hale for the next morning. In the meantime, Mrs. Park sent an email to my teachers reminding them that students' personal belongings are not instructional materials and that consent is non-negotiable. It shouldn't have felt radical. It did. That night, I wrote in my diary, I want to hide. I also want to be heard. I will pick being heard. I didn't sleep much. My stomach felt like a fist. But weirdly, under the nerves, there was a tiny cold of relief. I had said no. Even if my voice wobbled, I had said it. The next morning, we sat in a small conference room that looked like every school conference room ever, neutral walls, motivational poster, a clock that ticked too loud. It was me, Mum, who had shown up like a storm in lipstick, Mrs. Park, Mr. Davies, and Miss Hale. Miss Hale started with, if I caused discomfort, I apologize, which is apology adjacent, but not the real thing. Mom said, she reached into her backpack in a voice that would make a judge straighten their wig. Miss Hale said, I was seeking an example to benefit the class. Mr. Davies said, calm but firm. Students' personal journals are not to be used without consent ever. Then Mrs. Park did something I didn't expect. She opened a folder. We've received 2 prior concerns this year, she said gently, from students in different sections about personal materials being used in class without permission. She looked at Miss Hale. They were resolved informally. In light of this, we're taking a more formal step. My heart skipped. She did this before. It wasn't a one-off lapse. It was a pattern. Miss Hale's face went pale. Those were misunderstandings, she said quickly. Students left their notebooks on my desk. Mom leaned forward. Even if they did, that doesn't make them yours. Mr. Davies nodded. We have to be very clear about boundaries and about modeling them. There was a pause. It felt like a scale tipping. Miss Hale, he continued, we're placing you on administrative leave pending review. He said it with the weight of a decision he didn't want to make but had promised himself he would when needed. We will notify your department chair and HR. In the meantime, your classes will be covered. She blinked rapidly like the room had changed shape. This is absurd, she said. I've taught for 19 years. I care about my students. I believe you do, Mrs. Park said, kind, but immovable. And caring includes consent. Mom took my hand under the table. I realized I'd been clenching my fists. I let them unfurl. Miss Hale looked at me, eyes shiny, and for the first time, I saw not a villain but a human who had let her belief in her own goodness justify a harm. I felt a tiny sting of empathy. Then I remembered the laughter, the line where she said, notice the cadence, and I let the empathy sit next to the boundary instead of replacing it. She stood. I will be contacting my union, she said, and my attorney. Of course, Mr. Davies said. We'll cooperate fully. She left. The door clicked shut. The clock ticked. I exhaled a breath I'd been holding since yesterday. Mr. Davies turned to me. We'll also address the student behavior, he said. The nicknames stop. Today. He looked like a man who could make that happen. He did. There's this idea that justice feels like fireworks. In real life, it felt like paperwork, meetings, and small quiet shifts. Within a week, the school sent a letter to all families clarifying policy. Students' personal belongings, including journals, are private and may not be used for instruction without explicit consent from both student and guardian. They added a module to teacher training about student boundaries and trauma-informed teaching. It made the local news. The article used a stock photo of a notebook and a pencil that looked way more dramatic than my battered diary. Miss Hale took her leave while HR investigated. They interviewed students from other classes. Patterns emerged. A poem read without permission here. A private sketch held up there. No malicious intent, just a belief that the ends teaching justified the means. Privacy violations. The union represented her. In the end, she wasn't fired, but she was formally reprimanded, removed from classroom instruction for the rest of the year, and required to complete professional development on consent and boundaries. When she returned the following term, she moved to curriculum, work still English, no live classroom. Some parents were furious she wasn't fired, Others said the punishment was enough. I didn't campaign either way. I want to change, not a head on a spike. The nicknames stopped. When one slipped and called me Queen Bee in the hall, a teacher heard and gave him Saturday detention with a reflection essay on harassment. Do reflection essays solve sexism? No. Did it make the halls quieter? Yes. Ava apologized. In a note at first 2 pages, neat handwriting saying she froze and she was sorry she didn't speak. She wrote, "I was scared and I chose silence. You deserved better." We sat under the stairs one afternoon, legs touching, and I told her I needed friends who could look at me when I was hurting. She cried. I cried. We decided to try again with a new rule. We tell the truth fast, even when it's awkward. Word travels. He found out. He texted, "I'm sorry that happened. I never wanted to be a secret you got mocked for." He also asked asterisk, "Can I call you?" We talked. He said he liked me. I said I liked him. We decided to stop doing the non-relationship where everything is a question mark. We tried for real. It lasted 3 months. It ended gently. He was kind. I didn't need to turn him into a villain to keep the lesson. I couldn't open my diary for a week. It sat on my desk like a tiny animal I didn't know how to feed anymore. When I finally opened it, my hand shook. I wrote, "Dear notebook, I'm scared of you now, but I miss you." And then slowly, I wrote everything I'd been holding. I wrote about my teacher's face when the policy letter went home. I wrote about my mom squeezing my hand. I wrote about the weird relief of speaking. Healing looked like boring routines and tiny rebellions. I started therapy with Mrs. Park's list of local counselors. I told the therapist I felt like my private thoughts had been dragged into sunlight and left there to bleach. She said, "We'll build you a shade you control." We worked on boundaries you can say in 1 sentence. No, that's private. I'm not available for that. I practiced in the mirror. I practiced on spam callers. I practiced on people who loved me. I asked my dad what he does after hard calls. He said, "I wash my hands for too long." I laughed. Then I started doing it after rough days, warm water, slow soap, a ritual to tell my nervous system we're done with the emergency. I also set a new rule for my diary. It lives in a lockbox in my room, not my backpack. Not because I'm ashamed of what I write, but because privacy isn't secrecy, it's care. I got a cheap lock with a silly key shaped like a heart. It made me feel 9 years old and invincible at the same time. At school, I found my way back to writing by starting a student anthology with Mrs. Park's help submissions, anonymous unless writers chose to attach their names. The first issue was messy and perfect, poems about grandmothers, stories about buses and breakups, a recipe that made 3 of us cry. We put a statement on the inside cover, shared with permission, kept with care. It felt like building the thing I needed in the moment I didn't have it. Sometimes I saw Miss Hale in the staff car park carrying a laptop and a stack of papers. She didn't look at me, I didn't look away. If we made eye contact, I nodded. Not forgiveness, not friendship. Just acknowledgement that we live in the same world and it is complicated. The boys on the basketball team eventually stopped snickering. One even asked me to read his college essay. I said yes with conditions. He wrote about his sister and the day she was born and how her lungs squeaked like new shoes. It was lovely, I told him so. He cried. People are not all one thing. Ava and I made a pact. If we see someone small being stepped on by someone big, we move. We speak. We disagree with our favorite teachers if we have to. We practiced on each other when we interrupted, when we made jokes that hit wrong, when we left texts unanswered for 3 days and pretended we didn't see them. We are still practicing. Justice didn't look like a firing. It looked like a policy that outlives us. It looked like training that means another kid's diary will stay closed. It looked like my school adding a slide to every syllabus at the start of the year. Consent in the classroom. Your belongings. Your boundaries. The first time a teacher read it out loud, I felt that coal of relief glow a little brighter. My diary isn't a weapon anymore. It's not a secret either. It's a tool. Sometimes it's a friend. Sometimes it's a mirror I don't love, but it's mine. I write now like the words belong to me, which they do, until I choose to share them. If you're listening because someone took something private and made it public, I want you to know the shame isn't yours to carry. The story is still yours to tell. You get to choose when and how and to whom. You can say no. You can say stop. And when your voice shakes, it doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're moving. I won't pretend I'm fearless. I still flinch when a teacher says volunteer to share. I still tuck my bag under my chair in class. But when I walk past the English hallway now, I don't feel small. I feel like someone who built a door where there wasn't one And sometimes, on quiet nights, I open my diary to the page where I wrote, "I will pick being heard." I trace the letters, I breathe, then I write the next line. If this story felt familiar, if someone crossed your boundaries and called it a lesson, tell me in the comments. I read them. If you want more true, messy, honest story times like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you've got a friend who needs to hear that privacy is not secrecy, it's care, send them this video. We're building a community where stories are shared with permission and kept with care. Thanks for sitting with me. See you in the next chapter.